Dallas, Texas, one of the most populated cities in the entire United States. A mecca for superior athleticism, great media coverage, and some life-changing events that nobody will ever forget again. Such as November 22nd, 1963, when somebody forgot to put the top up and got their top blown clean off. And boy, back and to the left, back and to the left. And then we go all the way over to February 10th, 1984, when David Von Erich couldn't gut it out and then was left in a pool of whatever in his hotel room in Japan. Okay, it didn't take place in Texas, but he made his name in Texas, so it counts. And then we go to April 12th, 1987, when Mike Von Erich just couldn't take it anymore and decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go rolling towards Lake Dallas. And then unfortunately, well, Chris Von Erich, less said about that one, the better. Just wanted his VCR back. And then Kerry Von Erich, after crashing into a parked police car and going through so many things, let's go to the hop. Let's go to the hop, oh baby. And then, of course, we have April 19th, 1993, when, well, a couple hours north in Waco, Texas, David Koresh, his compound, yeah, that didn't necessarily go all that well, but somehow the Koresh compound and gathering still wasn't as life-altering or as bad, as cult-like as whatever the fuck took place in AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas on April 3rd, 2016, because my goddamn goodness. You could argue the WrestleMania 32 is not the worst WrestleMania of all time. Your mileage may vary. You could argue whether it is or not one of the messiest WrestleManias of all time. But you can't deny that this event took so goddamn long that it practically bled into the next week of television. No wonder they went to 2 nights, even if you could argue that 2 nights of WrestleMania, the most stupendous 2-night event in history, really is dragging on just as much as a one-night show. But boy, oh boy, WrestleMania 32, the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. Everything. Literally everything. Because it felt like they were barely filling the gaps with anything meaningful before going on to a match that could either be pretty good or what the fuck. I'm John Rentham with a retro view of WWE WrestleMania 32. Yeah, there we go. Originally, I actually did do a video on this back when my channel was growing, and it was actually a 52-minute review. I'm not going to go that long on this one, even though I did a really, really long intro right there, being cruel and whatever, because I don't really fucking care at this point. I decided, after covering the 2016 Rumble, no, I didn't cover Fastlane, I didn't cover Roadblock, end of the line, I decided to go all the way to WrestleMania 32. The big reason is, there's so much to unpack from this show, and there are so many things that went into making it, at times, a big spectacle. It was a big goddamn deal to get a huge crowd in AT&T Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys play. Hey, and championships were defended. Not that the Cowboys currently know anything about championships, especially world championships being defended. It was like 1996 when they last won. But that being said, realistically, WrestleMania 32 is not the worst WrestleMania ever. That would belong to WrestleMania 9, or WrestleMania 11, or a few others. WrestleMania 15, you could argue, was worse. But the biggest reason why events like this and WrestleMania 35 are looked down upon is they took forever. If you cut out 4 of the matches on this show, besides a payday, would anybody have missed these matches? No. The answer is fucking no. And I want to know your thoughts on WrestleMania 32 in the comments, please, as we roll along towards, well, as of this recording, WWE Elimination Chamber in Chicago that I will not be watching because I don't fucking feel like it. And then WrestleMania 42, once again in Vegas. I'm going to be perfectly honest here, guys. I'm looking back even 10 years ago to see if anything will spark my willingness to continue to review wrestling beyond another few months. Because it is really getting kind of dire. I mean, I'm hurt, I'm old, I'm tired, and I was 35 years old when this goddamn event came out. So, let's talk about the kickoff show while we're at it. And then I'll get into some of the minutia about the show. Because we have Renee, Booker, and Lita doing the first hour. Kathy Kelly and Tom Facefucker Phillips were there. And Corey Graves was among the fans. JoJo doing the interviews backstage, or at least some of them. And bless JoJo, she's been through a whole lot. Hall of Fame recaps. Mauro Ranallo, Byron, and King were calling the pre-show action. I'm glad that Mauro Ranallo stepped away when he felt that he needed to. Apparently, he is calling the action for Maple Leaf Wrestling, or Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, which I believe is closer to his home. I know he obviously has struggled with bipolar disorder, had family strife and stuff like that. I believe a family member passed away. And, Mauro got a little bit out of control with some of his pop culture references and stuff like that. But when he was on and calling the action, there were very few better than him, especially among this crop. I'm sorry. Anybody that feels that Michael Cole is a really good commentator, you are welcome to have your opinion. But I do question how long you've been watching wrestling, or if you want to pay attention to the commentary. So anyway, Kalisto, Lucha, the man that likes to do a good Lucha thing, even though that didn't come around for another few months. I can't imagine why he blocked me and several others. He defended his U.S. title against Ryback. Ryback in his last WrestleMania appearance. One of his last appearances for the company. To be perfectly honest, I don't think anybody really missed him. Eden Styles doing the ring announcing. I wonder what happened to her. Of course, it was an open mic night. Bitch. So, truth be told, a heel Ryback could have worked. And realistically, had Ryback decided to stick around, because I remember him saying he got a 3-year, $1.5 million deal. $500,000 a year. And maybe there was a chance to have a little extra due to merch and stuff like that. I don't know. I can't recall. But the fact that they were willing to give this guy, who was pretty goddamn poisonous at this point, $500,000 to keep him around is saying something. He has not made a lot of wrestling appearances since, and I don't think it's been really sorely missed. Kalisto, he got Ryback to a halfway decent match, and Ryback did some good power spots. This wasn't a bad match. It wasn't a great match. It could have easily been on the SmackDown before, but there was a delayed superplex. That was nice. There was a couple near falls. Ryback was not going to win this, though, and Kalisto ended up winning it with an outside DDT. So there you go. Not a bad match, not a great match. But what was bad was the following match, even though there are some good talents in there. We have Team Total Divas, Paige, and boy, Paige fell off the goddamn mark. Regardless of personal issues, all that, whatever. By this point, Jesus Christ, she had shown up and shown out the Raw after WrestleMania 30. 2 years before, or just about 2 years. I don't remember the exact dates. Now, she's in the 10-woman pre-show tag. Alicia Fox, that one that worships at the altar of the criminal piece of shit currently in the White House. Really not surprising, given her career choices. Natalya, pretty much the only talent on this team. Brie and Eva Marie. Yeah, they really thought that Eva Marie would be something. She was great at getting heat, in the sense that she was not good in the ring, was never going to be good in the ring. Against Team Bad and Blonde, Beautiful and Dangerous. Remember when they had those factions show up just before SummerSlam and it was messy? Yeah. Emma, the one that liked to pop bubbles. And I don't know what the deal with Emma was. Actually, I think Emma had gone heel here. We had Lana in her debut. Naomi, the one that hits the move and they call it the rear view. Summer Rae and Tamina. Let's dissect this match and note that if you could have made this a 6-woman tag, and you still would have been stretching it for talent at this point. But everybody just get in here and do your spots and rush through shit. And they did rush through shit. And I'm not saying that they were the only ones, but despite the fact that they did a 2-hour pre-show with a lot of filler, damn near killed her. This is exactly the kind of shit that they would rush through. Lana and Eva Marie. Look, Lana, bless her, tried. Eva Marie, I'm not saying she didn't try, but she fucking sucked. Paige dove onto the pile. They popped for Brie because Brian Danielson had just retired. I was at the event. It was nearly 2 months before this, where he announced his retirement in Seattle. Now dry in the house. Then he'd come back 2 years later, and I digress. But in Melee, Naomi and Brie tried to have some good action in the sense that Naomi was trying to basically carry Brie to something passable. And, yeah, there we go. So, A crossface won it. All right, whatever. I mean, it makes sense that Brie would get the victory because then Nikki came out. She had neck surgery of some variety. I can't remember if she had discs fused or what, because I know she came back later in 2016. She came out with the yes chant. In her gear, could have just come out in regular clothes, but whatever. And there we are. Then Lita revealed the new WWE Women's Championship, getting rid of that ugly-ass Divas title. And I'm not even knocking the women that held the Divas Championship, but that thing looked like a trinket. That thing looked almost as bad as the 24/7 Championship. Almost as bad as the Saudi Arabia Greatest Royal Rumble Championship. It looked horrible. It never looked good. And then the Usos beat the Dudleys in a 5-minute match and meant absolutely nothing. Pretty much like Bubba's opinions now. And yeah, remember the Usos' old theme? Yeah, there you go. They won with a splash and then won with a super kick and then put both the Dudleys through tables. So let's just talk about that pre-show right there. Would that have enticed you to sign up for the award-winning WWE Network? Yes, this is back during the network days before they would go to Peacock sometime in early 2021. And now they're on ESPN thinking with this product they can charge people $30 a month and they won't be just going to a VPN or not watching at all. Yes, the network was $9.99, and even with its issues, even with its updates, by this point things were better 2 years into the network, two years and change. But would this have enticed you? Yeah, it was cool to see a stadium, and this thing still probably even had some pay-per-view buys. I didn't write that shit down. But by this point, they were heavy into the network stuff. So even as the network was exploding and they were carrying stuff on, would this have enticed you? It wouldn't have enticed me, to be perfectly honest. But it was what it was. But then we open up with Fifth Harmony, whoever the fuck they are, singing the America the Beautiful. I'm not knocking. If you're fans of them, that's fine. I don't know who the fuck they are. So then we go through some clips and pictures of the history of Mania from 1 to now, excluding the bad stuff. And we get a big old pyro display. So far, okay. Grandiose, big stadium, big crowd. It was announced, well, it really was like about 80,000. They announced it at 101,000. I guess they include everybody that had helped build the goddamn stadium. But the commentary for this was by Cole, Byron, and JBL. Now, JBL at points wasn't too bad here, but then just as many times he would also get overbearing and it would get ridiculous. And then again, JBL is known for always wanting to try to make himself seem bigger than he ever actually was as a single. So, 7-weight IC title ladder match, which was pretty much the second best thing on the show. Not really saying much, given the state of this entire card. But you have Dolph Ziggler who's here to show the world. You have Zack Ryder, woo woo woo, you know it. We have Kevin Owens defending his IC title. We have The Miz. And we have Sami Zayn, who had recently returned at the Royal Rumble. We have Sin Cara. Yes, Mystico, who actually I think that was Mystico. Was it still Mystico? Was Mystico still there, or did Mystico leave at that point? And they just threw the Sin Cara thing on somebody else. And Stardust. Whatever happened to that guy? He should have taken a different road to stardom. Ha! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, it's Cody, by the way. Just for those of you that aren't fully aware. It was a car crash, but here's the thing. Yes, they were overdoing the ladder match stuff even at this point, but it wasn't as egregious. People were crashing through ladders. People were at least making enough spots count that, considering what would follow this whole goddamn thing, some of the booking decisions and some of the match length, at least this brought the crowd up. This started the show off hot. You could argue that the WrestleMania 31 ladder match was better. I'd say it definitely was. But it is what it is. The crowd was super pumped. We got to dive through, a ladder by Sammy. I could do that, meaning I would bounce right off the goddamn rung of the ladder and be knocked out forever. Sin Cara crashed into Stardust after being sent off a ladder onto Cody, who was on another ladder. And Zack shoved off Miz to get the victory. So realistically, there were car crash moments. This is a fun match to see, but if you have been watching a bunch of wrestling, before this and, before this event happened, and since, ladder match, ladder match concepts, any variation of them, have just been done so far to death. Like, so goddamn much. It is so ridiculous. Like in AEW, in WWE, I'm sure in TNA for the 5 people to watch it. It just, I don't know. It just, ladder match concepts, many concepts in general have just gotten so goddamn ridiculous. But that being said, this was actually fun. This actually started the show off fine. And Zack Ryder will go on to hold the IC title for a long 24 hours until Miz came in with his twat wife and everything. And yeah, I don't mind calling her that because she supports the criminal piece of shit as well and has done some questionable things. So yeah, there you go. I'm going to throw certain jabs in here upon reflection, so I don't really give a shit if anybody has a problem with that. And then we had 4 or 5 minutes between when they cut away from Zack Ryder celebrating to the entrances for the following match. AJ Styles making his first WrestleMania appearance. Yes, just recently, AJ Styles officially, announced his retirement on Raw, is going to go into the WWE Hall of Fame, or has already, depending on when you see this. And it's Chris Jericho against AJ Styles. Y2AJ Explodes, that long association of like 3 weeks where they made merch and then they decided to do it. Let me say this much. This match would have gotten a much better reception from fans in the building and fans watching had they gone about 5 minutes shorter than they did, and if the right guy had won. The problem is the right guy did not win. And I'm not going burial, I'm not going full on ridiculous, but this was not a good idea because nobody wanted to see Chris Jericho win this match. It was well worked, but the feud felt forced. And that's the thing. People were tired of Chris Jericho at this point. Because he left it after SummerSlam 05, the Raw after SummerSlam 05. He went through some trials and tribulations. I believe his mom passed away. Or a familial relation. I think it was his mom. That's unfortunate. And I'm not knocking here. I can imagine that would be very tough on him, and he probably need to compartmentalize and take some time, besides doing a book. And even when he returned in 2007, he felt refreshed. He stuck around until sometime in 2010, and then left for a bit, I believe. And then was back in 2012, had that feud with Punk, and had been making sporadic appearances since. The thing is that Chris Jericho was a big star. Emphasis on was. But even here, it felt like he didn't need to be there. If he was not on this card, if you had taken, say, Kevin Owens. If you had Kevin Owens against AJ Styles, you can't tell me that match wouldn't have popped. You can't tell me that that they couldn't have done something else with the ladder match. You could put Chris Jericho in a goddamn ladder match, but then again, he probably wanted to win a match at Mania. Like, him winning a match at Mania in 2016 was going to fucking matter. The forearm misses. He did get hit with the code breaker, but just for 2. A delayed 2, by the way, so they did protect the finish there. I will give them that much credit. We did get the walls locked on. We got a calf crusher spot. We got an inside-out bomb for 2. A Styles Clash for 2, so already kicking out of the Styles Clash. And yes, I know that a majority of fans did know him, and some carried over to watch AJ Styles from TNA, from his Ring of Honor days from New Japan, but still, you're introducing him to a much wider audience, because the vast majority of people may have heard the name, but may have not seen him, and you're having his finish kicked out of already, so it's going to take a bit to rebuild that whole thing. We got counters, we got, a phenomenal, we got a 450 for 2. The forearm, by the way, finally, was going to connect, except Codebreaker. 1, 2, 3, and the crowd. The crowd was like, what? Why? No, AJ wasn't buried. AJ would go on to have that feud with Roman Reigns that we never revisited, and I'm kind of disappointed by that. But had they done that shit off of an AJ Styles Mania win, it would have meant even more. Yes, he had that feud with John Cena. Yes, he beat him at SummerSlam. He would beat Dean Ambrose, aka the future Jon Moxley, or the returning Jon Moxley, in AEW, for the WWE Championship, I believe, at whatever event it was in 2016. I can't remember if it was Backlash. I don't think it was Backlash. It might have been. But there we go. So, AJ Styles shouldn't have lost this, though. That was a really dumb decision. Maria Menounos, wearing a bandana on her head for some reason, was interviewing Zack Ryder, and there we go. Then we got a cereal box with New Day dressed up as DBZ characters. I do have to also say Maria Menounos gets a bad rap because passionate fan, I believe she inducted Bob Backlund into the Hall of Fame, if I recall correctly, because not a lot of people from Backlund's past were either available or alive to induct him, and Maria Menounos gets a bad rap. I actually think that she's a celebrity that means well. So anyway, we have the New Day. Yes, Kofi, Big E, and Xavier against the League of Nations. Remember the League of Nations, aka Group Make Roman Look Strong? Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about this right here. So it was Del Rio, Sheamus, and the fuck else was Rusev, because Wade Barrett was at ringside. I think Wade Barrett might have actually been dealing with an injury. This is a cool-down match, and the match wasn't very good. In fact, the match sucked. In fact, the match could have been on Raw, and it would have been fun. Had it not been for the aftermath of this incredible explosion from the people, it would have made more sense to just have it on Raw. Del Rio was checked out by this point, would be gone within the first or the next few months. Big E dove, spear tackling two of them, and then colliding with Barrett on the outside. Then a bullhammer and a bro kick pins Xavier. I think pins Xavier. Xavier or Kofi. I kind of tuned out of this one because it wasn't really all that good. And it was a standard match. And it was odd, though, that New Day were the tag team champions. Granted, the titles weren't on the line. It was a six-man, but still, you could have had New Day win because the League of Nations, I believe, were disbanded within the next month. Because Barrett would be gone. He would go do What Culture Pro Wrestling or Defiant Wrestling. He would eventually make his way back as a commentator. Saying some very correct things, by the way, about Nikki Bella last year, that as far as her in-ring work, that people probably shouldn't have gotten upset about. But, and that's fine, everybody has different opinions. But Barrett, pretty good commentator now. And he gets on the mic and says, no three men can, stand up to us. Suddenly, Shawn Michaels' music hits, and Shawn Michaels is still in great shape. This is just 6 years after his retirement that he never broke. He never broke it. Shut up. No, he didn't. But Mick Foley also came out, and then Steve Austin to a big pop. And I'm surprised I didn't see any bruised knuckles from beating one of his wives. And yes, Steve Austin is one of the biggest stars of all time. Do not tell me that he didn't fucking do it. Because that doesn't negate his stardom, but it's not like he's an exact saint. And I can say that. And HBK, by the way, hasn't really changed either. He just became a Christian, got saved. He had to run to something invisible and fictitious, in my opinion, because he had alienated so many people. That being said, they got in the ring, and yeah, we just got a brief brawl, and we got sweet chin music. Stunners were dished out. Xavier even took one. And Xavier took that stunner pretty goddamn well. So there we are. And realistically, it's feeling a bit like Mania, but at the same time, there's just enough pulling you back from it. Like, we got the big pyro. We had the big ladder match. Styles' Mania debut. We got the returning legends. But it was relying just as much on nostalgia as it was on new guys. And again, questionable booking decisions. Speaking of which, we had Brock Lesnar against Dean Ambrose. It was a no-holds-barred street fight, and I believe Terry Funk showed up on a Raw and talked to Dean and gave him some ideas, some toys. But Brock was checked out of this feud, as Mox had said, because Brock was about to go to the UFC and fight, was it Mark Hunt? I remember his brother Mike. But anyway, it was at a UFC event in either June or July. I think July? I think so. I remember ordering the event, but I can't remember if it was June or July. Nevertheless, there were moments in this match that actually worked, and I don't blame Brock for not wanting to do some of the crazier spots. Like, there was actually a motherfucking chainsaw, so come and get it. But there were some parts where you could tell Brock was not as into it. Now, Brock was into enough of it, but he basically just squashed Dean. Dean got in some shots, took a beating, took a bunch of suplexes. A belly-to-belly off the top was very impressive. And then we got a chair in the corner where Brock was going to be staring up at the spotlight. A chair pile in the ring. A DDT on it for 2. And then a barbed wire bat that doesn't really get used because a German on the pile. And then F5, 1, 2, 3. And by the way, also, I went through this a lot quicker than they went through on the pay-per-view. I mean, I'm not saying it needed to be like 5 minutes, but Heyman also hyped up Lesnar in a pre-match promo that felt like it was about as long as the match, even though it wasn't. And there you are. I mean, Brock would go off and face Mike's brother, Mark Hunt, and then Dean would go on to eventually, win the Money in the Bank and cash in. Because we'd have Seth against Roman, and then we'd have Roman go away for 30 days, and Dean would end up cashing in, and we'd have all 3 Shield members as WWE Champion on the same night. Because we just can't get away from the fucking Shield, which is great for its time. So anyway, we got a Snickers ad between Flair and Zack Ryder, and yeah, that was something. There's a lot of ads and a lot of padding and stuff in this that I'm kind of skipping over. Because if you've noticed, I'm glossing over some of the finer details of these matches because, 1, the show is nearly 10 years old. 2, do you really want me to break down everything and make this an hour-long video? No, if you do, sorry, I don't really want to be here for an hour doing that. The Hall of Fame class. So as the Freebirds, we had Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin, who were the worst incarnation of the Freebirds. Sorry to Jimmy Garvin, who was a great heel with Precious and the feathered hair and stuff like that, but in WCW, less so. We had Terry Gordy's son, and we had Buddy Roberts' son, I assume, that were there. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen that one in a while. We had the Godfather being inducted. We had the Big Boss Man. You could definitely tell that was his family. You had Jacqueline, or thanks to Derb Jaqueline. Thank you, Derb. Thank you very much for that. Stan Hansen, inducted by Vader. It's a real shame Vader was not inducted in the Hall of Fame before he tragically passed away. But Stan Hansen, from Texas, obviously deserved the induction big time. The feud with Bruno alone, where he accidentally broke Bruno's neck, even though Bruno didn't hold anything against Stan. We had Snoop, Joan London, who won the Warrior Award, and Joan London did beat it was some form of cancer. I don't remember which one. I do remember Joan London. I believe she was a morning or afternoon host. Or is she a news reporter? I'm trying to remember. I remember Joan. I know the name Joan London, and I used to know more about her stuff 10 years before. And then Sting was the headliner because he got his neck busted in the Night of Champions main event. And then he said he's officially retiring. But the only thing for sure, or with Sting that's for sure, is nothing's for sure. Probably butchered that. And then he come back in AEW, would have fairly decent run. I'm actually very grateful that I got to see him at a couple AEW shows. I believe it was the first Dynamite when he came out to celebrate with Darby, and then when he showed up against Darby versus Christian Cage, and then Copeland made his debut in front of 6,500 fans in an 18,000 seat arena. Good times. But that being said, it was cool to see Sting. And then everybody comes out on the stage. That was nice. And then Becky in her steampunk era. Forgot all about that with the weird goggles. And then Sasha comes out with her cousin Snoop Dogg. And boy, I forgot how bad whoever that artist is that sung Sasha's theme. But whoo boy, should not have done a live performance. My word. And then Charlotte comes out with Rick. So Charlotte with Rick in her corner against Becky, against Sasha. 3-way women's championship match. Well, they're erasing the history of the original women's championship, but they're getting rid of the Divas title. Now, to be fair, Charlotte had been the Divas champion. Had defended it pretty well. Even in that feud with Paige, where she said your little baby brother didn't have much fight in him, did he? And Charlotte and Becky had a match, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was at the 2016 Rumble. It was a 2016 Rumble. I reviewed a lot of shit, and you will forgive me if I forget some of this stuff. But they were building all this up, and it made sense because these three put on some great clinics in NXT, at some of their, big events and then takeovers. And now it was time to shine on the Mania stage. And this was the main event of the show as far as many were concerned. This is what people were looking forward to. And the ladies delivered. Sasha bumped her goddamn ass off. Her weave didn't come loose. The glue held it on. I'm sorry, but I just can't help it. If you have to wear that stuff, regardless of whether you're a man, woman, animal, vegetable, mineral, then eventually something's going to happen. It's going to try to escape and attack somebody like a symbiote. Or like in that movie Bad Hair. Or In Fabric. In Fabric is about a killer dress. Moving on. It was the best show, or best match on the show. The crowd was very into it. A frog splash as Charlotte had Becky in the figure 4. Charlotte certainly, tested the mettle of her opponents and was tested herself. TNA Creative will get that if they happen to be watching this. Nobody else will. But Sasha did a dive and pretty much rolled through and almost landed on her feet. Good spot there. Becky dove on Rick. It was deserved. All the stuff we found out about Rick, not even the plane ride from hell, but just the various things where Rick arguably is one of the greatest of all time, but good lord. So, Rick then ends up coming back into play later, but before that, Charlotte does a great moonsault to the outside. We got big moves aplenty. It looked like one was going to win and the other was going to win. And it was obvious Charlotte was going to win, unfortunately. That's about the only one where I don't think that they should have had her retain, even though I get it. But Rick ends up holding Sasha, hopefully without doing too much of what Rick is known for doing around women. And a figure 8 wins it. So there you go. Becky tapped out. And all these three would be involved in the mix and feuding a little bit later on and then in subsequent years because these are the feuds that never end. But on this night, big moments, good stuff. And in Shane's 2016 return, really feels like a fever dream. Because there was a lot of excitement. What was in the lockbox? Why in the world did Stephanie really think that Shane shouldn't have been back? You could see it on her face. Because I don't even think it was necessarily just kayfabe. Looking at just how Stephanie reacted, it was what it was. Shane ain't exactly my favorite. He took a fucking picture with DeSantis, that piece of shit. But Shane, at least as far as in the ring, was willing to take the most risks. So Shane comes out with his kids. And then Linda was there, the one that's trying to dismantle the Department of Education, despite not being any kind of educator herself. He makes his entrance. Money falling and all that, and then Undertaker makes his long-ass entrance. It takes about 4 fucking years. This is another one where I'm not going to get into the minutia of the match, because had you taken, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have no-sold stuff, but had you taken the constant rest periods out of this, this was about a 16-minute match. 30 pissing minutes. With entrances, it was about 40. And yes, I get it. It's WrestleMania, but Shane had to win, and then he would control Raw. But then Shane didn't win, but then was able to control Raw. Because why bother being logical with the book? What was in the lockbox, by the way? Undertaker and Shane, Hell in a Cell match. And I'm sorry, I don't care how tough Shane is. I don't care how much he trained in MMA, whatever. And Undertaker, by this point, was well past his prime. And was washed, as the kids say. But 30 minutes. At 20, I could understand. But then again, with the long entrances, you would have had to... Whatever. This show went nearly 7 hours with the 2-hour pre-show. Nearly 7 hours. And I can't imagine those bathrooms are easy to get to for a lot of people that are on the floor seats. So Shane ended up kicking out of the last ride a few minutes in. And then got a triangle choke. He was trained by the Gracies. He looked like he was trained by my rabbit Gracie, who had been dead by this point for about 4 years. A choke slam on the steps for 2. Shane McMahon kicking out of this stuff. There were legit wrestlers, sorry Shane, that weren't kicking out of the last ride, but Shane did. And then we got punches in a Hell's Gate by Undertaker. Just that's what Undertaker was making a noise of. And then a sharpshooter by Shane. Still did it better than The Rock. He hit a coast-to-coast, sort of. He probably shouldn't have been attempting that because it was hard for him to even do that in 2009 before stepping away for years. But then he gets bolt cutters. And this is where we begin the part where the match practically stops. They get the bolt cutters involved. Taker slams Shane through the now cut door. They get outside. They get around the ring. There's a point where Taker, with Shane on his back, tumbles through a table to get him off of him. And then they have a toolbox that's used right to the head of Undertaker. And then a monitor's used on the head of Taker. And I know I know it seems like I'm making this exciting, but no, this match plays out very glacially. And then he climbs to the top, which, yes, I don't want him to slip, but again, we are going very long on this. He gets all the way to the top, and then he drops through the table as Michael Cole reads For the Love of Mankind from his script. And right there, Michael Cole should have been tarred and feathered, and we should have got The Rock's flamethrower to chase him out of the goddamn company. He was reading off a goddamn script during this supposedly insane moment. Because Michael Cole's really bad at his job. The GOAT, as somebody says. Kier. I like Kier. I just felt like saying that. Kier's not going to be watching this. Kier's a really good guy, by the way. Just, it's fun to have, little barbs to throw back and forth. So, anyway, eventually, they get back in the ring and Taker hits a tombstone for 3. And then Taker makes his long-awaited exit, or his long-anticipated exit, or his long exit, basically. He takes forever, and they get a cart for Shane, who is sweating all the time. Incredible amounts of sweat. He literally just became 100% sweat at this point. Forget sweating to the oldies, it was sweating to the McMahons. So, yeah, there you go. We're done with the Hell in a Cell match. So now how are we going to follow this up? Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. I was surprised to see DDP there. I was surprised to see Tatanka there. Oh, Diamond Dallas Page. Oh, I see what they did there. Tatanka was there. As Heenan said, part of the Lumpy Indians. Somebody greeted him one time, and you know what they said? Bobby Heenan said this. Hi, how are ya? Hi, how are ya? See, I said that because Bobby Heenan said it. Anyway, so Baron Corbin was in this and various other jobbers. Remember the Social Outcasts? Remember Shaq when he teased appearing in WWE as a wrestler? The guest host of Raw in 2009, they teased something with him and the Big Show happening that might have actually been good to see at WrestleMania the following year, or even SummerSlam. But they didn't do that. We did get a Diamond Cutter. That was cool. Corbin won the match. It wasn't very good, but it made sense for Corbin to win because he'd done enough in NXT, and they had to call him up to do something. And now he's Bishop Dyer and MLW and doing stuff, and hopefully not harassing friends of mine on Twitter because they say their opinions about his boring ass. That's from years and years ago, and like one person will get it. Mania 33 plug, they were in Orlando. And then the Cowboys cheerleaders danced on stage. That was nice, at least some. But whatever. They were all dancing, and why were they there? Oh, The Rock showed up to a big pop initially. And he had a flamethrower and was flamethrowing stuff, and then flamethrowed his name that just happened to be there on part of the stage. I am definitely not going to break this down line by line, or even minute by minute. But this segment was excruciating. It was cool at first because Rock got to announce the attendance, and it was nice to see a big star there, and I got why they were doing it. But it felt like a 40-minute segment. I think it was only maybe 10, maybe 15, but still. By the way, 101,763. Bullshit. Bullshit. That being said, it was a big deal to see The Rock there. Just like a big deal for HBK, for Austin, for Foley to show up, and for DDP to show up and stuff like that. By the way, we should have gotten DDP versus The Rock at one point instead of the Stalker angle, but no, we couldn't have DDP being featured properly, even though he wanted to plan out his matches, and Taker and then his stupid twat wife at the time, Sarah, wanted to be part of it. But whatever. The Wyatt family then shows up. No Luke Harper. I think Luke was injured. something. I don't remember exactly. But Bray was there, Rowan, and Braun Strowman, who was just a year away, really. Well, I mean, would start doing squash matches and gain a little bit more over, but then would have the feud at Roman right after Mania 2017, I'm Not Finished With You, which is pretty much his peak. And they went a long time. Bray went a long time. Bray deserved better, but Bray also could get very lost in the weeds with some of his words. He was a great, articulate individual, but sometimes his promos were a little bit much. But Rock really was ridiculous. Forget the eater of worlds, you're the eater of hot pockets. His insults worked better in the Attitude Era. But then he wanted to challenge one of them to a match. So he faced Rowan and beat Rowan in like 6 seconds because they had to get around anything happening like happened with Cena versus Rock at WrestleMania 29 when he tore a bunch of muscles and delayed the shooting of a movie. So we couldn't have the goddamn people do that shit. Whatever, it's fine. Then we were going to get all three attacking, but then John Cena shows up. Cena had some injury. Shoulder, arm, I don't remember, or shoulder, or low, or bicep, or whatever. I don't remember. I don't remember what it was. But then they beat up the Wyatts, and that was pretty much it. So, yeah, that was fine. And then we got the 4 minutes video packages, and Triple H with his undead whatever the fuck thing that was supposed to be. It was like a Silent Hill, Dark City, undead, Resident Evil bullshit thing. Where Stephanie's there on a goddamn, platform. Like, Stephanie has ever done anything to deserve any amount of television time except being treated like the goddamn, narcissistic bitch that she is. The one that compared the 9/11 attacks to what happened with her family at the steroid trial. And the one that seems like she believes she's a creative person. She's fucking not. She never fucking will be. And I hate Stephanie. And I hate Stephanie for a goddamn good reason. Because she's just like her goddamn dad. And a lot of people want to whitewash her shit. I will not do such a thing. But this ego-stroking entrance where, yes, Triple H got a big pop when he won the Royal Rumble 2016 event. He won the match. That's wordy. He won the WWE Championship and would then defend it for a little bit. But this is 2016. It wasn't even like 2008. It wasn't even 2006, 2008 where he could have justified being champion. He was a part-timer. He was running creative. He was doing this stuff. And now he's brought in, he's going to make Roman look strong. You know what he didn't do? He didn't make Roman look strong. They booed the shit out of Roman. They booed everything he did. Literally everything in this WWE Championship match. Where 27 minutes felt like 27 hours. It felt like 127 hours. I think my arm being caught in the cliff there would have been less painful than watching this. Because they booed everything Roman did. And it wasn't all Roman's fault. It was the booking. But at the same time, Roman really should have been presented as a heel. And he fucking wasn't presented as a goddamn heel. So eventually, people just started to say, okay, no, we want somebody new. We don't mind Roman, but we don't like this presentation. There were people that hated him. There were people that went too far, booing and making comments. I was probably one of them, I remember, if I recall correctly. But a barricade spear. This was agonizingly slow, which I didn't expect them to go with flip-de-doo and go 10 minutes, like Eddie and Ray at Halloween Havoc 97, even though I think that was shorter, or I think it was actually about 12 minutes. But Roman may have hurt his arm doing the barricade spear, but this went forever. This went goddamn forever. And then Triple H got a bunch of holds, like a crossface. And hold number 1, arm bar. And not the must-covered family 3-handed credenza. But then Stephanie kept interfering and got speared. Unfortunately, didn't get legit speared so her kids could watch their stupid mommy, basically get taken down. I'm not getting fired up about this, like, blending the character and the person. She's an evil she's an evil bitch is what she is. And she should be told that. Has a smile that's so goddamn disingenuous. Good God, it's like Bart, with the goddamn dentures or whatever, smiling. So anyway, a spear. Stephanie took the spear. And then we got no selling between the guys. Bop. And eventually the sledgehammer, why don't you call my name? Spear, 1, 2, 3, pyro, and that's it. And my God, this event took forever, and I went way longer than I expected. But boy, oh boy, what an event this was. What an event. 2 really good matches, and everything else ranged from decent to agonizingly drawn out. And that's all I have to say about that. WrestleMania 32, one of the messiest WrestleManias ever. One of the worst Manias ever. Your mileage may vary. Agree, disagree with what I said? Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. Until we revisit the Dallas wrestling area again, with just only one Von Erich around, happy trails to you.